If you have, hello everyone. I'm Janet B., recovered compulsive overeater. Happy to be with you all tonight. If you have your big books, we are going to start on page 89, the chapter Working with Others. Okay, so here is one of my guilty pleasures. I will confess, I like to watch Law and Order. My husband says it used to be good when Dick Wolf was writing all the scripts. It's not good anymore, but I still watch it. And you know, if you've watched Law and Order, you have seen the cases where a diplomat from a foreign country comes to New York, commits a horrible crime, but the cops can't touch him because he has immunity. That means he is protected. So if we look at the first line in page 89, yes, for you who are new, I'm not going to spend the whole meeting talking about my TV habits. There is a point. Look at the first line here. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking or compulsive eating as intensive work with other alcoholics or compulsive eaters. This is the only place in the book where it talks about being insured. That means guaranteed immunity, right? We all know immunity from vaccines. You get a vaccine, you're supposed to get immunity from it. Diplomats have immunity. Imagine us having immunity from compulsive eating. It's like being in this box, with, I don't know, a band of angels or guards around us so that the illness of compulsive eating can't touch us. That is guaranteed to us if we intensively work with others. And now it says it works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. So they don't say, well, we come into a meeting, admit we're powerless over food, and then start intensive work with others. It doesn't work that way, right? What qualifies us to work with others? Well, if we think about step 12, the only step that starts with a promise, it says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other compulsive eaters. So, what they're telling me is, I work these steps and then I have immunity for the rest of my life, so long as I work with other compulsive eaters, and obviously also live in steps 10 and 11, right? Clean up the wreckage of each day and pray and meditate to know God's will and try and get close to Him. But we can have immunity unless you're thinking, okay, well, how do I get from step one to step 12, where I get, step 12 is where I get the immunity, but I'm on day one. We're very fortunate. We're very blessed. Page 46 of our big book tells us that we start getting the power that we need as soon as we begin, as soon as we say, maybe there's a power greater than me that can restore me to sanity, and we start practicing spiritual principles, we get an infusion of power, just enough power to get us to the next step, I think. And then by the time we're finished the steps, again, if we keep clearing up the wreckage of each day, step 10, praying and meditating to know God's will, and then intensive work with others. That does not mean take a food plan, call me in the morning, tell me your food, and I'll give you 5 minutes of my day and move on. Intensive work. So it says, carry this message to other compulsive eaters. I have no right to make up my own message, right? I have to carry this message. And then it tells us you can help when others can't. You can secure their confidence. Remember, they're very ill. And I think that's important to remember. If we're sponsoring someone and they pick up and eat compulsively, it's not that they're bad. It's not that they deserve a lecture. They're ill. I mean, the fact that I'm not binging today just means that I got on the bus stop. I got on the bus a couple stops before the next guy. It doesn't make me any better. Just means maybe I got on the bus a little sooner, or I need to tell him what bus to take. Doesn't make us any better because we're not in the food. And then it gives us some beautiful promises. Life will take on new meaning. I don't know about y'all, but I used to sit there and wonder, why am I here? What's my purpose? Why am I here? And it tells us life will take on new meaning. to watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, loneliness in myself, because I was lonely. I could be in a room with 100 people and feel like I was the only person on the planet. Loneliness disappeared for me. I will tell you guys that is really true. I'm not lonely anymore. And we see loneliness disappear in others, right? It says to see a fellowship grow about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. So when I read that, my jersey comes up and I'm like, yo, how do you know that I won't want to miss it? How do they know what I'm going to, what I'm going to want and what I'm not going to want? Because they know that if I work these steps, if we work these steps, our hearts are going to change. Our motives are going to change. What makes us happy is going to change. And they say, you won't want to miss this. Frequent contact with newcomers and each other is the bright spot of our lives. So that kind of gets us excited about it. And then, so we may be asking, okay, what do we do? And they say, yeah, you may not know anyone who wants to recover. Says you can find some. Now, just to put this in context, this book was written when there were very few meetings. For sure, there weren't Zoom meetings. Not everyone had a big book. And the way they got new people was by going to the local hospital and saying, do you have any drunks we can help? By calling a pastor and saying, do you know any people who can't stop drinking? So we have to just remember the context of it because it says, perhaps you're not acquainted with any drinkers or bingers who want to recover. If we go into the rooms of Overeaters Anonymous, we will be acquainted by people who want to recover. And it tells us, it gives us some advice. It says, don't start out as an evangelist or a reformer, someone who wants to, has a mission to change other people's mind. That's not what we are. We don't, when I meet God one day, he's not going to say, Janet, you helped X number of people recover. Very good. He's not going to look at numbers. He's going to look at my heart. Was I obedient to him? I don't have to sit there and try to have the most numbers. We're not evangelists or reformers. A reformer, we're not trying to convince people that they need to do this. We're not out to reform the sugar industry. We're just people who couldn't stop eating and needed a spiritual way of life. And it tells us ministers and doctors are competent, you can learn from them, but because of your own drinking, binging experience, you can be uniquely useful. And I always think about that, like, why? Why can we be helpful when others can't? Well, I think one is it gets rid of the shame, the shame factor. If I tell you about some of the crazy things I did with food, it makes it a little easier for you to tell me about some of the crazy things you did with food. And also, we have like a proven way that works. Do these 12 simple but not always easy things. And it says cooperate, never criticize. So we don't criticize the pay-in ways. We don't criticize any variation of a 12-step program that does it a different way. We don't, we just say this doesn't work for us. And it tells us our only aim to be helpful. That's it. So page 90, it says, okay, when you discover a prospect, find out all you can about him. So what I do is if someone says, oh, can we work together? I don't, I don't sit there and say right away, yes or no. I want to find out about her. I say her because I only sponsor women, but obviously for men who work with men, same thing. It says first, if the person doesn't want to stop drinking, don't waste time trying to persuade them. So if someone says, I really don't want to stop binging, we say, okay. Now, here's the thing. Some people will say, I must not want to stop binging. And I'll say, well, why do you say that? And she'll say, because I keep picking up the food, so I must not want to stop. And it's like, no, no, no. The definition of addiction is wanting to stop, but being unable to. So what I often ask someone who says, I must not want to stop, I say, if your fairy godmother came in and could wave a magic wand and could make you stop binging, would you tell her to go away? Believe it or not, two people once said to me, yes, I just want to keep binging. And for those people, I got nothing, right? We pray, we hope, we stay friends, but we can't help someone who wants to stop. We are here for the person who wants, or we're not here for the person who doesn't want to stop. We're friends, but we can't sponsor them. But for someone who says they want to stop, yes. And why? Well, it tells us we may spoil a later opportunity. So let's say I sponsor someone and she's doesn't mean business. She's not willing to go to any lengths. I spend time with her. We talk about the steps, blah, blah, blah. And after a month, she binges, says, forget it. It doesn't work. She keeps binging. Well, what's going to happen in 2 years when she's really desperate and she really wants to stop and she's really willing to go to any lengths? She'll think back and say, oh, yeah, I tried that Overeaters Anonymous. It didn't work. So that's why we don't want to start with someone who doesn't mean business, because then when they do mean business, they may think that this doesn't work. So it tells us to get an idea about the person, their behavior, their problems, their background, the seriousness of their condition, their religious leanings, right? We want to just get to know the person. And here's one thing I believe: people don't like to feel like projects. You know, I went to ChatGPT today and I said, how many times is the word friend used in this chapter? It said 4. I know it uses the word friendship and fellowship more. Melissa, no, ChatGPT is wrong. Um, okay, so the word friend is in here at least 4 times. So people aren't projects. Like, these are friends. These are fellow human beings that, we can like have coffee with. It's like, so that's what they want. We're to be interested in them. And then it says, sometimes it's wise to wait until the person goes on a binge. Really? And it's like, yeah, how come? And they say, it's better to risk it because he'll be more likely to listen if he feels hopeless. And they say, ask if he wants to quit for good and if he would go to any extreme to do so. And this echoes what it says on page 58, where it says, if you have decided you want what we have, right, a spiritual experience as the result of these steps, and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then and only then are you ready to take certain steps. And they say, if someone doesn't want that, again, we don't continue with the person. I'm going to skip to page 91, where again it says, call on him while he is still jittery. He may be more receptive than depressed. So one thing I would say is we don't want to give false hope. When someone is depressed, we don't, and they're just going to meetings, but they're not working the steps, we don't want to say, oh, just keep coming, it'll get better. I mean, if I were diabetic and went to Diabetics Anonymous and I went to the meetings regularly, but I never injected the insulin, I couldn't expect to get better. So to say, just keep coming, it'll get better. No, I kept coming for 6.5 years and it got worse until someone told me how to work the steps. Okay, and then they talk about how to talk to the person, page 91, general conversation. Talk about drinking. If his mood is light, tell him humorous stories of your escapades. Don't moralize or lecture. And that when he sees you know all about the drinking game, the binging, describe yourself as an alcoholic. Tell him how baffled you were, how you learned you were sick, right? It's an illness. Show him the struggles you made to stop, page 92. Show him the mental twist which leads to the first drink of a spree. That is really important for a person to understand. On our website, recoveryjam.com, under other resources, there's a one-page sheet called The Broken Bridge that just explains the mental twist, how the mechanism that protects me from getting cat-induced asthma attacks didn't work when it came to, bulimia fueled binges. Didn't work. There was something in my brain that was different when it came to food than it was with other things that were dangerous to me. So again, you can read about it, and if you have any trouble, you don't understand it, reach out to someone who's recovered, and we're happy to help you. Page 92. If you're satisfied he's a real alcoholic, real compulsive eater, begin to dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady. And that sounds kind of mean, right? Imagine if, like, someone has diabetes and they go to Diabetics Anonymous, and then it's like, yeah, you could go blind, you could lose your legs. Like, this is really bad. But they say we can do this because we have a solution, right? We can only help people to see the hopelessness of it because when they do, we offer them a solution. Again, on page 92, they say continue to speak of alcoholism, compulsive eating as an illness, a fatal malady. Talk about the conditions of body and mind which accompany it. Well, that's interesting. They're saying the conditions of the body and mind are like accompaniments. They're like side dishes to the real problem. And what's the real problem? Well, if the solution is a spiritual experience, then the real problem is a spiritual problem that can only be solved by a spiritual experience. The fact that our bodies and minds are all messed up, that's just like a side thing. And again, they stress you may talk to him about the hopelessness of alcoholism, compulsive eating, because you offer a solution. They say, okay, let him ask you how you got well. Ideally, the person will say, okay, I see that you were as sick as I am now. What did you do to get well? And they say, stress the spiritual feature freely. Now, I've heard sometimes people say, well, if the person doesn't want to believe in God, we don't want to scare them away, so let's start gently. So again, let's go back to our diabetic patient who needs insulin, and imagine her going to a doctor and the doctor saying, you have diabetes, you need to inject insulin. And she says, yeah, I don't like needles. And the doctor says, okay, then we'll start you on vitamin C. No, like vitamin C is not a substitute for insulin. And when someone wants to use the group as a substitute, no, or a doorknob, no. Because our problem, as we talked about when we did We Agnostics, is lack of power. And the solution is to tap into a source of power greater than me. It's like an infusion of power that we get from God. You all might love me, but you can't give me one drop of power. And a doorknob certainly can't give me power. So they say, stress the spiritual feature freely. If the man's an agnostic, make it emphatic. He doesn't have to agree with your conception of God. So if you don't have the same religion as me, that's fine. If you don't have any religion, that's fine. It says he can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. So again, knowing our problem is lack of power, and the solution is to find a power greater than ourselves, which will solve our problem, an infusion of power. It has to make sense in those terms. And then it tells us the main thing. So here's the main thing we have to stress when working with people. He be willing to believe in a power greater than himself. And it's really crazy. Once someone's willing, miracles happen and God reveals himself. Willing to believe in a power greater than himself and that he live by spiritual principles. Okay, so from day one, willing to believe. We can say, it's okay if you don't believe. Are you willing to believe that God exists? And the old saying, there's no atheists in foxholes. When people are desperate, or as our book says, beaten into a state of reasonableness, willing to believe that maybe God exists. They say that, and that he lived by spiritual principles. So what does that mean? Well, this book is filled with spiritual principles. Karen M. once went through the first 164 pages and made a list of them. But to sum up page 14, it says, if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and he would surely drink. Spiritual principles, main ones, work and self-sacrifice for others. Sitting on my couch making an outreach call is not a self-sacrifice. By definition, self-sacrifice means I'm giving something up in order to help another person. I'm giving up lying on my couch watching Netflix in order to help a sponsee, and listen to her fifth step, in order to go to a meeting, right? So again, we want to every day be able to look and see, did I do any self-sacrifice today? And that's how we grow spiritually. Other main spiritual principles, honesty, right? Beginning of chapter 5, it stresses how important honesty is. Unselfishness, tolerance for people who are different from us, compassion. So again, right from day one, practice spiritual principles. My sponsor told me first day, first time you lie, we're done. May have sounded a little harsh, but you better believe I didn't lie anymore. Okay, it says, when dealing with such a person, someone who doesn't believe in God, use everyday language. Don't use big theological terms. Like, don't talk about the incarnation and things like that. You just talk about God, love, power, faith. And it says, okay, your new person may belong to a religious denomination and have an education and training that's better than yours. He's going to wonder how you can add anything to what he already knows and wonder why he is such a religious person, but he's still binging and you're not. And then it tells us why. It says that person may be an example of the truth that faith alone is insufficient. And that was me my whole life. I don't think there was ever a day in my life where I didn't believe in God. I always believed in God. But I was like a practical agnostic. I believed in God and did whatever I wanted. Faith alone does nothing. It says to be vital, to be alive. Faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice. There it is again, self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. That word constructive, like constructed, to build something. Unselfish action. And what are we constructing? What are we building? I believe we're helping God in his renovation of other compulsive eaters like us. To be vital, to be alive. Faith and self-sacrifice, unselfish constructive action. It says, we're not here to instruct anyone in religion. It says, they probably know more than we do. It doesn't matter. But just emphasize to the person that however deep his or her faith and knowledge, he couldn't have applied it or he wouldn't be drinking. Because they're telling us what they know. A proper faith, which means not just belief in God, but a surrender and doing what I think God wants me to, plus practicing spiritual principles, which includes clearing away the wreckage of our past, always results in recovery. So they're saying if he had applied his faith and knowledge, he wouldn't be drinking now. And there, again, they stress page 94, we don't represent any faith or denomination. We're dealing with general principles common to most denominations, like unselfishness, love, right? Things like that. And then it tells us to outline the program of action, talking about basically how you work the steps. You made a self-appraisal, you straightened out your past, and why you're now looking to be helpful to him. And it says it's important for him to realize your attempt to pass this on plays a vital part in your own recovery. He may be helping you more than you're helping him. Okay, funny story here. Number of years ago, my family had, my husband and me, my two kids had a cruise planned. It was all paid for, and then my husband lost his job. And I was I was fearful. And I went on that cruise, and they didn't have OA meetings, but they had those friend of Bill meetings, so like for AA. And so I went there, I'm thinking, I'm in like, I'm in fear now. I hope there is an alcoholic who can help me. And only one person came in. It was a woman. She was overweight. She said, I'm in AA. I'm like, okay. I said, I'm in OA. Like, have you ever? And she said, well, look at me. Like, of course I'm in OA too, but she wasn't successful. And I started sponsoring her on that cruise ship. And actually, she ended up not living too far from me. She would come to my house. And I remember saying, like, I went there to get help from someone, and I did. And she went there. No, I went there to get help, and I did by helping her. And she went there to give help, in an AA meeting. She was recovered in AA, and she went there to give help, and she did by helping me and letting me work with her. So helping others, I mean, I do this one, Dr. Bob says we do it for a few reasons. Like one, it's fun, but it's also an insurance policy because every time I work with someone else, it's like I'm taking out a little more insurance that I don't go out and binge again. So it's not that I'm Mother Teresa, it's that I need to do this to stay healthy. Okay, it says, make it plain he is under no obligation to you, that you hope only that he will try to help other alcoholics when he escapes his own difficulties. It's under no obligation to me. So just because I'm the first person to talk to someone, if she wants to get another sponsor, it's fine. It's fine. No hard feelings. It's not whoever tags the person first gets them. No. And it's interesting because the balance seems to shift. Sometimes there's like lots of available sponsors and a newcomer can, have their pick. And then sometimes there's lots of new people coming in and not enough sponsors. But I believe like God works it all out at the end. And we just tell people this is free. We will never take a dime. Our only hope is that when the sponsee recovers, you go out and help other people for free. And then again, it tells us, suggest how important it is that he place the welfare of other people ahead of his own. From day one, start doing things for other people. Anyone who's got a family can start placing the welfare of their family members ahead of their own. That's hard, but we start doing that. If we live alone, we can drive to Target and fold clothes for 20 minutes to help out the poor, overworked, store clerks. Like we look to do things for other people. We make sure there's no pressure. And again, it says, if your talk has been sane, quiet, and full of human understanding, you have perhaps made a friend. Every now and then you'll hear someone, say, I'm your sponsor, I'm not your friend. I don't see that supported anywhere in this big book. We are friends. Like, what does that even mean? I'm your sponsor, not your friend. Does that mean like I'll help you recover, but if you live in my town and you get a flat tire, I won't go and help you? Like, that's ridiculous. Um, so we are friends, whether they decide to work this program or not, they're friends. And it says, sorry, maybe you've disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. That's good. Again, the more hopeless he feels, the better. He will be more likely to follow your suggestions. And it says, okay, the person may give reasons why he doesn't want to do this. He may rebel. We're all a little bit rebellious, right? At the thought of a drastic house cleaning, which requires discussion with others. Don't contradict this. Just say, I once felt that way, but I wouldn't have made much progress if I hadn't taken action. And again, that was me, the person who 12-step me said, are you willing to do everything in this book? I said, no, there's an amend I'm not willing to make. And she just very wisely did not contradict me and just said, can you just trust that by the time you're on step 9, you'll be a different person? And I said, okay. And I did end up making that amends. And then they say, okay, you've had your first visit, you've gotten to know the person, you've established a friendship, the person feels comfortable and says, If he shows interest, lend him your copy of this book. Um, and I always thought, like back then, not like now where everyone had like 4 copies of the book. Like imagine the guy just has one book and he's lending that copy out, right? Like he really cares. But what we really want to do is make sure the person understands what this program's about. So now that usually we meet people in OA and they have their own book and they've read it or at least most of it. What I often do is give them a podcast to listen to that, just kind of explains the way I understand the program and then tell them, okay, now you understand me and how I work. Call me back if you still want to work together. It's like a 40-minute podcast that talks about step one. So if you don't have a podcast that you've made, you can direct them to someone else's, or you can just have a conversation with them, or you can tell them to read the text section of this book, the first 164 pages. That's what they did back then. Read the first 164 pages. And it says, give him a chance to think it over. So my protocol is I have someone listen to a podcast I did that so they'll just kind of get to understand how I work the program. Then we talk again. Then I have them do some work in the doctor's opinion. We do some work together. Then I tell them, so we've now had, this is our third conversation. I then tell them the things I ask my sponsees to do, and I give her a chance to think it over. I always say, take the night and think about it. Even if she says, no, 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 I want to proceed. I'm like, take the night and think about it. And just so you know, I'll tell you the things I ask my sponsees to do. Again, if you want to ask them to do something different, it's fine. These are just things that I feel are helpful. One, spend 30 minutes every morning with God, because this program is about developing a relationship with God. And we can't develop a relationship with someone we don't spend time with. And I will, help her, give her some ideas. Generally, unless there's a reason why not, a meeting a day. And I tell her meetings I want her to go to, ones that I know where she'll get good information. 3 phone calls a day to people in recovery, and I will give her a bunch of numbers of people in recovery so that she starts developing a fellowship. Rigorous honesty. I tell her she has to be honest with me and everything else in her life. And she has to do self-sacrifice every day, at least one act of self-sacrifice. And then we'll work through the steps together. I'll give her an assignment. She'll do it. We'll talk. It'll be every day, every other day, depending on how quickly she moves. But so I say, those are the things I require. Take the night and think about it. And they say, we're not supposed to rush someone. They say, if he has trouble later, he is likely to say you rushed him. And it tells us we'll be successful if we don't have a passion for crusade or reform. We're just trying to help someone get on the bus, right? Never talk down to an alcoholic from a moral or spiritual hilltop. We're not any better. We just got on the bus a couple stops sooner. Simply lay out the kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. And what are the spiritual tools? The steps. Show him how they worked with you. Offer him friendship and fellowship. That means if your car breaks down and you're in Raleigh, North Carolina, I will help you. Tell him if he wants to get well, you will do anything to help. So this is work. It's not like take 2 food plans and call me in the morning. It says, if he's not interested in your solution, if he expects you to act as a banker for his financial difficulties or a nurse for his sprees, that means someone who calls and says, I binged, what do I do? And then 3 days later, I binge, what, and never does what you tell them and just keeps, wanting a nurse for the sprees, says, you may have to drop him. If someone isn't willing to go to any lengths and do the work, we drop him until he changes his mind. Notice it's not saying if someone picks up, we automatically drop them. They're saying if the person doesn't mean business. They say if he's sincerely interested and wants to see you again, ask him to read this book. He must decide for himself if he wants to go on. He shouldn't be pushed or prodded. If he is to find God, the desire must come from within, because by this time the person knows that the solution is to find God, or rather to put ourselves in a position where we can be found by God. And we'll pick it up here next week.